Thank you, Leslie, for reminding us to record and actually have on the recording that we're sending Jenny some extra energy because just I know she's been beyond challenged. So
Oh,
I was imagining what I went through with the packing up and multiplying that by two kids and then multiplying that by COVID, and I cannot possibly I just I've been holding her in like a psychic hug for days and really all of us. This has been a very rough time. Lori, how are you doing? I know we checked in on Saturday and you'd just gotten beaten up by somebody.
yeah, yeah.
Literally.
Well, emotionally,
Oh,
verbally, yeah, yeah. Essentially, it was just Susan will shoot me if I say a friend, a colleague of mine of 20 years, um, someone I've known for 20 years, and I often refer to this as a marriage of convenience. It's like we get together more because we know each other for so long and we both live in the same town and we're both single. But we have a lot in common, but it's just she's can be very challenging. And I had shared with her that I was having a rough week. Capricorn full moon really was kicking my butt. I was overly emotional and whatever. And she's like, well, what were you upset about? And I said, nothing you haven't heard before. It's just that normally I can handle it. And last week it was challenging to it. Long story short, um, she said, well, you need a business plan. You need a solid business plan, or you're never going to turn any of this around. And I said, well, I do have a solid business plan. I said, I'm launching this podcast in September with these amazing women, and that's going to get me a much larger audience than I've ever had before. And in the interim, I'm going to, you know, get some interviews on some other podcasts to reach their audiences, and that should help tremendously to grow my business. And she pretty much told me I was going to fail.
oh, helpful.
So, yeah, if I wanted to be successful, I had to pick one of my network marketing companies and drill down and build my downline and quit trying to look like a superstar, and that no one would ever join any of my teams because they would think they had to be on a podcast to do it. And I'm like, wait a minute, I have a coaching program I'm trying to fill here. It was just bless this woman's heart. She was an entrepreneur and made some mistakes and then got cancer and decided to go back into corporate, and she buckled down and did it, and she's making six figures and it's working for her, and now of course that's what people should do, right? So
Oh, I'm
It,
sorry.
it was I gave it to you in a very
Yeah.
it was like it felt like my heart hurt when I walked away.
Actually, Lori, I have no objection to what you call her. Just Leslie, just recounting the conversation we had, I got a really loud message to call Lori on Saturday. Like she needs a call. And I did. And this is what I recall you saying to me. You said, I just got ripped to shreds by a friend. And I
Yeah,
said, well, if you got ripped to shreds, I would question calling that person a friend because that's not how, in my world, how friends treat each other. So it went on from
right.
there. But
Yeah.
it was basically what you said. But what in the conversation that we had, Leslie, I'm curious what this sounds like to you. And I'm having what I call these days a split screen experience, where my enlightened conscious self that I'm evolving into, it has a big picture and is appreciating all of these things that are occurring in my reality at the moment, and my human is just fucking pissed. So I'm having this split screen and I'm honoring both of them and I recognize everything that's going on. And we were, talking the other day, and in that perspective, from the higher perspective, what happened with Lori and this person on Saturday was like so freaking perfect. That person provided like the exact response that the Matrix would have to somebody like you who is stepping into greatness. You can't do this. In fact, if I just reread the Having book, and at the end, where she had decided to quit her job to write the book, the things that people said to her were almost verbatim what this person
Yeah.
said to you. So this is how the Matrix responds when somebody else says, oh, you know, you don't have to sell your soul. You can express yourself. That it is so threatening and to people who made a different choice that they sometimes attack.
Mhm.
And we have all fucking been attacked. In fact, I want to share a brief little conversation that I had with one of my brothers about 20 years ago. I'll just share this snippet of it where it was that kind of conversation. And at that point, returning to corporate might have been an option, theoretically. Of course, now it's not. At that time, it would have been, and he was that. And this was my response to him. And you're welcome to borrow any of this if it resonates for you. I said, Bruce, I am either going to fulfill on what I came into this lifetime to do, or I'm going to die trying. But it's not going to happen in a cubicle. And we are not ever going to have this conversation again. Is that understood?
And I think a friend can say things that a lot of other people can't say. But I'm always of the opinion that you have to ask somebody, is it okay to share your piece of advice, your opinion, whatever it might be? Because actually nobody has the right to have a go at somebody else or to force their thought processes on to somebody else either. But people will always find that the harder somebody fights somebody to not do something, largely, I believe, there's more motivation in the person doing the fighting than there is in what they're fighting for. And what I mean by that is we often get concerned that somebody is going to be more successful than us, and therefore we try to divert them, or other people try to divert them away from that path because they never had the courage to take that
Right.
path themselves.
And,
Because it's
and
not
it's threatening even. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
I
is
remember
threatening.
being attacked by true friends, Lori, people that really were friends,
Mhm.
because my challenging the status quo and the choices they made, I mean, just by my choices, was so triggering that I had to be torched. I had to be
You know-
irresponsible. I had to be like, whatever. And there were relationships that ended.
Right. And the fact is, if I were imminently financially successful, none of these conversations would be being had. But because
No,
that wasn't
they might be had, but they wouldn't be triggering.
well, and this person was trying to actually help me because she knows I've struggled financially and she didn't want to see that happening anymore. And so she was going to tell me what I needed to do to be financially successful. But it's interesting when what you said, Leslie, about the courage, because I've been having this conversation with people since I was 21 years old. My mother was like, when I was in my early 20s, and keep in mind, my mom died when I was 23. So we're talking really early 20s. But when I was in my early 20s, my mom we were struggling. Our relationship was super hard. And finally, one day she wrote me a letter and she said, it's not that I'm not proud of you. It's just that you've done everything I ever wanted to do and never had the courage to.
Yeah.
Well, I just want to acknowledge that she had the courage to express that to you.
Yeah.
I know, right? It was huge.
Yeah.
It was huge. And I think in some respects, you know, what's odd about this is that this is the woman who 2 or 3 years ago was telling me, we want to get your business moving forward. You need to do a podcast.
Oh.
So I just think that it's more that she's at a point in her life where, you know, she's retiring from this corporate gig that she's been doing for so long. And I don't think she can handle the assumed fame that will come from whatever I'm moving forward with.
Do you know, I read a post today and I responded to it in this way. So apparently, Taylor Swift is receiving a lot of criticism at the moment. So Taylor Swift is probably the number one most influential, powerful person globally at the moment. Our interest rates in the UK are on hold because there is a concern that our inflation rate came down last month, and they're worried our inflation came down because of Taylor Swift being over here and the amount of, yeah, honestly, the amount of, hotel rooms and people eating out and buying merchandise. She is literally in Europe, literally moving the financial dial of many, many countries. There's been similar conversations said about the US as well, thanks to Taylonomics or Swiftonomics, as they're calling it. So she now is being criticized as a 34-year-old woman for setting a bad example to girls because she's 34 and she's not married and she hasn't had children. And my response
Wow.
my response was, when you are successful, some people will do anything they possibly can to bring you down so they can quite simply feel better than themselves. Now, Taylor can't win because if she had children and she left them at home, she'd be criticised for abandoning them. If she had children and brought them with her, she'd be criticised for dragging them, around the world with her. So it just
The
goes
truth
to
is,
show.
they are freaking jealous that a
Yeah,
34-year-old woman has this much true power.
exactly.
True
True
freaking
power.
power.
Exactly. Absolutely. And it just demonstrates how people react when they see themselves purely in the reflection of somebody else's success, as opposed to creating that success and that reflection. And that's what you've experienced, I think.
Actually, I'm glad we're recording this, and I want to restate that we're sending extra energy to Jenny today, but also to Sherry for whatever the heck is going on, because obviously something is. And I'll say this a little facetiously because I'm going to write this down. But if Sherry were here, I would ask her to write this down, because I think what we're talking about here is a really important topic for an episode.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in fact, I'm going to elaborate a little bit. One of the things I've been sharing with you is we've been keeping this Davina Rising thing going. Like, we've been having 2 Zooms a month, exploring different topics. And if you guys are not on the mailing list, I'll add you, and forgive me, but Jenny and I have been leading these 2 conversations, and they're at night. And each month we've been exploring a theme. And the theme for June was relationships. July is going to be freedom. But we've been having one Zoom basically about wealth and frequency from that perspective, and the other about wellness and frequency from that perspective. And last Thursday night, we were exploring the concept of relationships and their effect on our wealth in our lives. This is so perfect. And it was one of the more engaged conversations. There were about 8 of us on the line, and people got really involved in this. And I'm going to say that one of my truths is that what we're talking about here is a form of bullying. And it has been an almost universal force of bullying that has been going on to keep women for a very, very long time. And it needs to be called out.
Yeah, I agree.
And I have more to say about that than is appropriate at the moment. But there's a lot going on around that in my experience. And what we're doing is personally threatening to people as well as disruptive culturally, for the reasons that we're talking about. And I think one of the reasons it's important to actually call this out and bring it forth is that we can identify it when it happens. Because it happened last week to you, Lori, and as you said, your heart hurt because it impacted you. We need to have some protection, I believe, ideally around this, to say the stance that I'm taking in the world is going to invite that kind of thing. And I need to sort of inoculate myself and understand that. And everybody's doing their own thing and their own path, and this is going to be triggering, and it has nothing whatever to do with me.
Yeah,
Right.
100%. 100%.
Another reason why community is so important, that we get to have these conversations, because we all need to
Right.
hear this. Because, you know, the things that are hitting me directly are hitting me directly. And I was saying to a friend earlier today, I was in the car catching up on a couple of calls, that I am unbelievably grateful for the awareness these days that I'm being triggered, because being aware that you're being triggered is a whole different experience from just being triggered. That distance, that space, that, you know, opportunity to witness. This is what years of spiritual practice makes possible, you know, that it's not necessarily an automatic thing, even though, like I said, my human is going through it right now, like a lot. But it's an interesting theme, I think, that's coming up.
Right. Yeah.
And if it's happening now and we haven't even launched, we haven't even, you know, got one thing recorded that we can lead with, if it's already happening, gosh, we better be prepared. It's going to happen, you know?
But I think
And
that's an appropriate response to have. And again, Lori, I'm, you know, we've got this tool.
Yeah.
That, you know, there are protection programs as well. That you know, we're sticking our necks out a bit, and we're going to go further. And I think, you know, just on a personal level, this feels like an important reminder.
I think being prepared is really, really important, because, you know, I am taking part in 2 visibility challenges this month. One, going live on Instagram for 30 days. I don't even like Instagram, but I thought it doesn't matter. I'm putting myself out there. And then the other is to go live on TikTok 3 times a week, once I've got live on TikTok, until the end of July. And I know with that, without a shadow of a doubt, I know I'm going to get trolled. Do I care? No. No, I honestly do not care. I know when we launch the podcast, there is going to be stuff that is said and done. You know, the keyboard warriors. Do I care? No, I don't. And I think that is the thing. It is to keep going. You know, touching wood as I say this, and I'm looking at my angel, and my money corner is down there. You know, I've been doing this schools program. Today I was out of the blue, not out of the blue. I knew I'd been put forward, or my program had been put forward, but out of the blue, one of our local authorities has given me the equivalent of $12,500 to put my program into 10 schools. I've had new people reach out to me wanting to work with me. And I know it's because I have adopted this Teflon approach of people will say no. People will say nasty things or whatever, but it makes no difference. I know the path I am on, and I know the impact I have and want to continue to have. And I cannot make that impact if I allow others' words to make me smaller and shrink me. So instead, I choose to future focus on what might be said, and already choose my approach of, it's not going to touch me. It is not going to touch me, because I know their game. And they don't even exist yet, but I know if they come out of the woodwork, you know, banging on their computers, this, and the other, it'll be Mr. Anonymous, because it's normally men, it'll be Mr. Anonymous, there'll be no picture, there'll be no defining way to know who they are. And if the best they can do is to hope to rattle us, then we will not let them rattle us, because they then have no power whatsoever. So I think we anticipate there being kickback, but not worry about it. Aha.
Jenny is here.
Hello.
Oh, honey. We are sending you as much energy as we possibly can. I've been thinking about you like 24/7. I feel so bad.
Does that mean I look as bad as I feel?
Well, you
Uh,
look like you don't feel great, but you usually look beautiful. So, it's a high bar to meet. I guess I've just been aware, and this is the way I've been expressing it. I know how hard the move was for me, my
Yeah.
move, and I'm multiplying that by 2 kids. And then I'm multiplying that by COVID, and I cannot possibly imagine how you've managed this. So I'm not responding to your appearance. I'm kind of, no, I've said that before you showed up.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh gosh. I totally forgot what day it was. I'm like texting you. I was like, I just woke up from a nap and I had drool everywhere. And you didn't respond. I'm like, oh, because it's Tuesday and they're all on a call. Let me jump on.
okay, I just saw your text, and Sherry had some crisis today and isn't here and is hoping to hop on. We were just doing some mopping up, I'll call it, and we were maybe gonna wrap up with that. And I did want to maybe move forward and ask Leslie about that conference and this whole menopause thing, because there seemed to be a real important thing.
Mm.
Jenny, I think I shared with you, or you may have picked up, that last Thursday, we actually ended up doing a mastermind session, the 4 of us, and like reworking our essence and bios in a way that we're all still a little bit shocked about. So we're looking forward to doing that with you. And I'm not suggesting it needs to be right now. And I don't think it's supposed to be right now, but it was very exciting. And I'm excited about sharing that with you, because I
Yeah.
think we all really refined some things, and it felt like a, 6-figure coaching session that the 4 of us had. That was way exciting. So
Very cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for thinking of me. How was
So
your
how are you feeling?
I am, not fantastic. It's just really like a lot of congestion, it's just kind of coming out. It's just really gross. It's the color of your shirt, Lori. And which is not fun, it's not, and that makes it even harder to sleep. And last night was our first official night here with the cats over here as well. And they were like so pissed off and just freaking out the whole night.
Mhm.
So I just finally, we have this really cute little really secure fenced in backyard. Not that they can't jump, but they're so skittish about what's going on. So I just finally let them out in the backyard. So I think they're starting to kind of calm down a little bit. But man, the kids have been totally easy and fine. The cats, not so much. So that's been the hardest part. And then yeah, just not being, I slept maybe 2 hours last night. Um, just because of my sinuses, and then the cats meowing constantly, like, what the fuck's going on?
oh, honey, I'm going to say something, and I'm assuming this isn't going to sound like any consolation, but like I said, you've really been on my mind. And I said to Howard yesterday, when I speak to Jenny, I'm just going to explain to her that in addition to everything else, she is burning off lifetimes of karma. This kind of shit has gifts that go along with it. I just want you to know that
Oh, I
it's not
feel it. I
it's
definitely
not
feel
in
it.
vain. The stuff that's being burned out of your being, and it sucks.
Yeah.
And
Uh,
I just want to remind you a couple of things. So Healy wise, the green is Pitta. It's infectious. If you've got the power of 3, Pitta would be a really good thing to be doing.
Yeah, okay.
Tracy offered to bring you some mineral shots. She'll drive them down if you want them. That will knock this out.
Okay. Yeah, I'll get with her. Yeah, I've been um excuse me. I've been pumping bioenergetic boost at like 80%.
Mhm.
I'm like screaming at my cells with that, but it was the only thing that kept me going. Um Especially like yesterday yeah, the past couple days, but it's been really
That was a special immune program that we couldn't say was for COVID, but they
oh
introduced it as
uh,
special immune support for these times.
yeah, the bioenergetic boost, yeah, he created that specifically for COVID. So that has been a godsend, the Healy. I love it so much.
Yep.
Um
I
so
don't
yeah,
understand.
huh?
You can't relate. And actually, I'm just going to say on that point, interestingly, I never actually got COVID, but I was directly exposed to it probably 3 or 4 times that I was aware that there was a day or two that I was fighting it off. And I would run scans and I would see that the bioenergetic boost would be really high. And I'd be running that and running that. And then over the course of a day or two, the scan would come down that I was successfully fighting it off. But I am sure that that was one of the reasons that I was able to so effectively.
Yeah.
The mineral shots were also pretty amazing. And I'm also getting, I'm sure you're doing this, but like a lot of care program.
Yeah, and a lot of the regeneration. I'm still having a lot of nerve damage issues with my foot. So
Oh
uh,
boy.
but yeah, and the redox molecules have been amazing. It's
Awesome.
I really love them a lot. And my cats are drinking it too. Oh, spot
Mm.
side. So cute. Um, anyway, but yeah, I miss you ladies. I feel like we haven't seen each other long.
Well, you haven't seen, we've actually, we've continued meeting and have been making a lot of progress. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to sharing all of that with you.
Yeah,
And
good.
we recorded that mastermind, didn't we?
We did. It
So
was
you,
long though. There was almost 2 hours and I was sure that you weren't going to watch it this week, but I actually think it would be worth all of us rewatching. And I actually had a download the following day about my bio and uh interestingly, I haven't written it, but I got the download of what it needs to say and it, I was excited about it.
Cool.
It was,
excellent,
and there was
excellent.
a big revelation last week about, and it actually started with Leslie basically saying, hey, I got a download about my niche. And it was a kind of a focus on menopause women.
Yeah, lovely. The conference that you're at sounded amazing. I didn't get to respond, but I was in between all the chaos, keeping up with looking at the chat. What was that about? Was it in London?
It was in London, yeah, but it was really interesting that we'd had the mastermind the day before, and I'd said that I'd had this download about I've always wanted to niche down more than just business women. I've never ever been able to come up with my niche, and literally I can't even quite. I had a call with somebody, and all of a sudden, ping. It's money and menopause basically, and how the menopause affects our financial health, wealth, etc. I went to a conference on Friday called Global Woman, and well, it was largely American women actually who were presenting on stage. One of them, she was there because she runs the New York chapter of Global Woman. I'm going to refresh my memory as to her name now, but apparently she appears on TV in America a lot. Dr. Kelly Ann something or other. Is very big into written a book about bone broth and all, how nutrition basically is your health, is your wealth, I should say. And she was a bloody walking advert, I tell you, because I honestly thought she was about 35. And when she was up and talking, I thought, I'm just going to Google her, just going to see how old she is. And she was 59 in June. And she just looked so fit and healthy. Then there was another lady there, a doctor something or other, a doctor. So Kellyanne Petrucci is the one that appears on TV a lot. Then there was another lady, I'll have to look her name up, she was a gynecological doctor, but menopause was her specialism. And there was somebody, and this made me think of you, Laurie. Yeah, that's her. Then there was somebody called Karen Grove, who has a business called Painting Your Soul. And she literally is helping people to make themselves well through the power of painting, and is sending these boxes to hospitals, to doctors' waiting rooms, etc., etc. I just made me think of you and your art and the
Obviously.
healing effect, of your art. But the really weird thing was, so there's me now, got my niche, that's it, I'm going now, it's going to be money and menopause. And I opened up the bag of goodies, and inside the bag of goodies was a leaflet there, basically, on on training to become, Jenny's gone,
Okay.
training to become, menopause informed. Well, as a woman who's going through menopause, I'm fairly informed anyway, but still, that just adds a little extra nuance. So everything seemed to be pointing to me, as I said, on our, what's the name, on the group, everything just seemed to be pointing towards Leslie, I'm showing you the way, menopause and money, menopause and money. And then I was in a mastermind with a group this morning, and I said to them, I just want to run by you, I'm deciding to niche down and I'm thinking of doing this. Well, they couldn't have supported and applauded me more if I tried, basically, and saying, yep, that's absolutely where we need to be. So I've now come up with the title, Money, Menopause and More, or More Money, Menopause, Money and More, because obviously it's a whole thing that can get pulled into that. And in my 27th hour of the day, I might start a podcast on it as well. So I know you dropped out there, Jenny, but there was so much at that conference, around menopause, around what you ladies talk about, around wellness. There was nothing that I can recall around. Somebody did mention, actually, epigenetics. They did mention it, but very loosely in passing, almost like you would all understand what that is. And until I met you, Laurie, I'd have gone, sorry, what are you talking about? No, thanks to you. I am not. So I would imagine a lot of the audience were left behind, but it does mean that this kind of conversation is starting, around the whole thing. Educate yourself. Look at things a little bit differently. Don't just read and believe what the newspapers have to say, etc. So it was really, I wish I could have been there on the Saturday, because Saturday was all about wealth. And unfortunately, I couldn't. I had a different event on. But it was all driven by the lady who set up Global Woman. It's a lady called Mirella Sula, and Mirella is a migrant from Albania, literally came to this country with nothing and is now a millionairess. And it's how she wants to pass how she did it, her connections, on to other people. She amazing. I mean, I know Mirella. She'd come on the podcast. She would very much come
I was
on.
going to say, that sounds like an awesome guest.
Yeah, absolutely. She'd come on the podcast
With a huge following.
Yeah, and she has got a huge following. Absolutely. And in fact, I was in the Global Woman magazine 2 months ago, had no idea what that meant really, until I went to this event last Friday, and they had all the front covers of the magazines, and there was Jennifer Lopez. There was, I can't remember who else, Jennifer from Friends. I can't remember her name now. But
Aniston.
all these bloody famous people, and Mirella knows them all. But you wouldn't know she knows them all. You would not know them. But what's also really interesting, one final thing, Mirella has been publicly speaking for years and years and years, and she put up her show reel. And I thought, oh, it's lovely. Her mum must have been a public speaker back in the day, because there was this typical Eastern European woman with dark hair, quite old-fashioned clothes, quite frumpy. And then it dawned on me, that wasn't Mirella's mother. That was a previous incarnation of Mirella. Mirella now has got blonde hair in a kind of curly, wavy way, big black glasses, and head to toe Chanel. You would not know she was the same person. She has gone on a personal transformation journey, but actually wants to take everybody else there with her. So there she is in the
Oh,
front.
thank you.
That's Mirella
In
now.
the pink?
But oh, yeah, in the pink. But you would not know from the show. And she said, I show that so you all can see the transformation that I have been on. And it's just fascinating. Absolutely
Wow.
fascinating. Yeah.
Wow.
That was the energy to be in on Friday. It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm going to say again, because, you know, I have my bias and when you talk about menopause, there's two like really important things I want to say for us.
Yeah.
One is it's a rite of passage that women don't know what to do about. So, you know, in terms of like what we know as coaches or marketers and, you know, all of that and finding people's pain points. And they say that the ideal demographic is an inch wide and a mile deep. This is so deep. This is like every woman. And I used to say that when I was in what, you know, school, what now would be called middle school, you know, there was a time where they took us into the auditorium and they showed us all these movies about menstruation and all of that stuff. There was no movie for menopause. There was no information shared whatsoever. And then my second point is no one hardly understands it at all.
Yeah.
And I was trained by a naturopath who was one of the few that ever did. Almost nobody can tell you what this is, what the dynamics are, and how to manage it. I can.
Yeah.
So we have, I shared, you know, a document with you. I don't know if anybody had a chance to look at it, of the coaching program that I'm not offering, but I have all of that content and information. And Jenny and I had been speaking about that. I'm also going to say from the perspective of the program that we are looking to develop of, you know, like a 10 module series of, you know, women's quantum wellness, basically. And the menopause, you know, perimenopause, menopause question was going to be a whole segment. Because Leslie, the perimenopause thing is actually in some ways even more disturbing.
Yeah.
And this is a topic that there is no intelligence out there, basically.
And even the doctor who was speaking on Friday, even she said, we're only just starting to understand, because it's not the menopause either. It isn't the menopause, because everybody's experience is going to be to a certain extent different. But what she said, which I'd never, ever considered. Now, given my message is we as parents should be talking to our children about money, she asked the question, did your mother talk to you about menopause? Hands up, fingers. No, and it didn't dawn on me to even think my mother would talk to me about menopause. But why would she not talk to me about menopause? I talk to my boys, 15 and 18. You know, they know about the different, and I've been very lucky with it. but I've made them aware because in years to come, you know, their wives, girlfriends, or whatever, they're going to need to know because it's not going to be our menopause, it's going to be their, you know, their menopause experience, you know, as well. But actually, as you spoke this, Susan, I suddenly thought, I am going to be dealing with the two taboos. We don't talk about money. We don't talk about the menopause. Let's talk about both of them, basically. But it was, and you are right, it is fascinating how these two things that are so major, you know, in our lives are given so little airtime, and we're made to feel, I don't feel ashamed, but we are made to feel ashamed that we shouldn't talk going through the menopause, you know?
Leslie, I want to put out something bold
Yeah.
here
Yeah.
because I came up with this a while ago and I never did anything with it. And it would be, I'm not sure what would be involved legally in trademarking this if we choose to or whatever. But one of the things I was questioning years ago, and because I looked at this deeply for a long time, some of the things we're talking about here. And one of the things I said was, it's actually called menopause. Why the heck is this
Yeah.
about men at all? And I
Menstruation.
considered
Yeah.
doing a whole branding thing,
Yeah.
and I am putting this out as something that we might consider as
Yeah.
something very, very powerful. I renamed it. We might consider this as a thing.
Yeah.
Calling it woman pause.
Yeah.
And actually, like, we are going to redefine this experience and take it back and
Yeah.
call it woman pause
Yeah.
rather than menopause, even though we understand, you know, the word derivation thing there. We are going to recharacterize this experience with truth and tools that will take us out of where we've been with it. Glad you're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
That could be
This
a
is-
very bold, cool thing to do. Because I have not seen that term used. You know, I can look it up, but I've never seen that term used. So I'm just curious how that landed. As
Well, this
Yeah.
this is society deep. I mean, it literally is, because we, the people like Susan's age and my age, have grown up in an era where, and I shouldn't say just our age, because the image of an attractive woman is young, vital, sexy, juicy, you know, all of that. And menopause, oh my God, if you've been through menopause, you're a dried up old hag. So it's such a taboo topic that women are made to feel god awful if they're menopausal, because they now don't fit that sexy, vitally alive, amazing model at all anymore.
No,
just an FYI, I just Googled woman pause because I was curious, and Google asked me, "Didn't you mean menopause?" And the only interesting. The only two items are somebody who has a blog, woman pause, women over 50. So it's being used on a very small level there. And apparently there's a book called Women Pause, Stop Pausing and Start Living. That's about the menopausal thing, but that term is not being used.
But did you know, and this is factually true, Google has a male bias, because if you ask
You think?
Google,
How shocking.
I know,
Never have suspected.
but isn't it wrong if you asked it? So, and the question, I'm paraphrasing the question, but it's something like, who has scored the most goals in a football competition? The answer they come up with is male. The actual answer is a woman has scored the most goals in a football competition. But apparently, and this is why AI is factually incorrect in lots of places, because obviously a big source for
Being
AI.
fed by the algorithms.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Wow.
Yeah. That's another topic that we could be covering on the podcast.
Wow. Jenny, I'm curious. I know your voice is challenged, but did you want to chime in with anything?
Well, I am in those beginning stages. I mean, I can definitely feel some of the symptoms that they say is going on. I mean, my periods are definitely getting lighter and um but I mean, yeah, there is such a taboo, but I was just Googling if you Google menopause and it kind of gives you with this list of options to like questions that you might have. It says, what are the prevalence? How common is menopause? And it says there's 3 million cases per year of menopause. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? This is like,
It's not a case,
it's not a case. It's not a case to be diagnosed. It's like something
not a
that
medical condition.
it's, oh my gosh. Yeah, people are just so
So
misinformed.
life transition, and I have to tell you, it's a pet peeve of mine that within the holistic world, bioidentical hormones are considered like that's the holistic choice. It's bullshit. They're not actually that much safer than the regular shit.
Mhm.
And that is not the natural solution. Almost nobody knows what they're talking about on this topic. And I know I sometimes hide behind credentials, Leslie. I'm just going to do this one more time. I gave a talk on this topic about 10 years ago here locally. And there was a woman doctor there who was an OBGYN who was really progressive. She was in her 70s at the time. And I had not met her, but I'd heard about her and read her blogs and was really impressed with her. And I found out she was coming to my talk and I was really freaked out, intimidated. And I told her that when she got there and she said, get over it, my profession is full of itself, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I had about 20 people there. And at the end, she stood up and said to the group, "You have no idea how lucky you are that you were here today. I learned a lot. This information is not out there. You have no idea what a good resource Susan is." So just saying, this is not an arbitrary comment on my part.
Mhm.
Nobody understands this. And I always said there were financial implications because the lack of sleep. Like, how can you think clearly when you're living in cortisol soup?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Well, and it's totally dysregulating the nervous system. And, you need to be in a peaceful, calm, receptive place to attract abundance.
There's
And
that
when
too.
you're all erratic, you can't.
Actually, but there's another piece, and I can actually bring this up, and I might indulge myself in showing you a graphic that is the hormone pathway. But this is what I want to tell you to like have a conceptual thing. What actually occurs at menopause, this is the truth. What actually occurs at this point in life, starting now in the mid-30s, is that a woman's body starts ramping down its production of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone by the ovaries because we are preparing to no longer need to support a monthly cycle. That's what happens naturally. It's, of course, exacerbated by the toxins in the world and, all that shit. But that's the basic process that happens. The way nature designed things, and almost no one knows this, I call it Mother Nature's backup plan. I coined that term. The way we were designed to function is that at the end of our reproductive life, when we don't need to pump out those same higher levels of the sex hormones that we needed to maintain a cycle, what was intended was that the adrenal glands were going to pick up that function and be producing the lower levels of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that we need later in life to maintain balance and health without needing to maintain a cycle. That's how we were designed to be. What happens in the real world now, contemplate this, 50 years old, more or less, stressed out your whole life, blah, blah, blah. and you say to your adrenal glands at the age of 50, oh, I'd like you to take on another job. Basically, what they say to most women is go screw yourself. I cannot take on another job. The backup plan is almost never implemented. And on this hormone pathway chart that I can show you, you can see there's something called the pregnenolone grab, that when the body is overproducing cortisol, which is the chronic issue here, this is the big issue here, it pulls the precursors that would otherwise have been available to make estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, and it pulls it down into the pathway to make cortisol. Cortisol is the issue here. Cortisol is interrupting the production of sex hormones, and the excess cortisol that the adrenal glands have been producing for years are what's saying, I'm not willing to take on another job. The other influence is blood sugar, insulin, because there's a synergistic relationship between insulin and estrogen. So it's very hard for a woman to get her estrogen balanced if her insulin is off. And there's nutritional choices there with, the blood type foods and just general blood sugar management. Those are the two things that we directly impact. I have taken women from hormone hell to postmenopausal balance just with these issues. And there are lab tests that we can get. I have questionnaires I've developed. There's lab tests that can be ordered that don't require any doctor to just confirm what your levels are. And the doctor that I worked with, who was a genius, he has a whole, with Douglas Labs, a company that I think is fairly well respected. He has herbal supplements, Chinese and Ayurvedic herbs. He was studying herbs since he was 9 years old, that help the body regulate its own appropriate levels of all the hormones. And I have taken so many people through this process, and they cannot believe what it's like to, this is me. Now, I understand what was off. I know, what the goal is. This is all I need to do. And almost nobody knows this. Almost nobody knows this. And I never got this out there. And the doctor I'm referring to, his name was Joseph Collins. He died a few years ago. I promised him many years ago that I was going to get his work out. I have to do this. He said that his success with it, he was a nurse before he was a doctor, and so he learned to think like a woman. And he worked for testing labs for years and observed these patterns and said, we're killing women. We're giving everybody a prescription for the same thing. There's 12 different types of menopause. There's a book about the 12 different types of menopause. In fact, when I found that book years ago, and I found him and I called him and I introduced myself and I said, you've got 12 types in your system and I have 12 in mine with the blood types and the Ayurvedic types. He said, Susan, your approach to lifestyle and nutrition management is much better than mine. Like if I'd known that, I would have included your work in my book. So we have some real solutions to offer. And it's something that women are just lost, and they're just lost about these things. And as we know, if the wealth part isn't working, the rest of it can't either. So again, I think this is a place where it's very powerful for those conversations to come together.
So if I'm hearing this correctly, when the ovaries start to shut down, the adrenals are supposed to pick up the slack.
Yep.
The stress levels that we have are so high in our world today that the adrenals are overstressed and can't take on this extra job.
Right.
And what is it that's disrupting the production? Cortisol is disrupting the production of, what's the precursor?
What I was referring to, it's called the pregnenolone steal. And actually, I'm gonna see if I can bring this up. If it's where I think it is, I can just show it to you because it's a little harder to describe.
This is such
Okay.
valuable information. I wish I
Thank
had known this 25 years ago.
Me
Mhm.
too. Okay.
Amazing. And I
Okay.
can see while you're pulling it up, I can see this, the implications of how that could be so detrimental to wealth and how we approach life, and I did also read something recently about
Small.
that there's new studies showing that women who have babies later in life, and I'm now kind of seeing this correlation of our hormones have to keep pumping
Mhm.
later when they normally would slow down. But like having a baby between like 35 and 40, even a little bit after 40, prolongs your life.
This is too small. I'll get a better one. I can't even see it very well, but the I need a better image. I'm sorry. I need a better image. I will share one and I'll explain it a little bit more clearly because it gets really obvious. Oh, the body's diverting all of these resources to making cortisol. They don't have any left to make the adrenals that are supposed to be making that aren't. But that was how we were designed. We were not designed to go through this. And interestingly, years ago, like long before I got to that point in life, but that I was studying these things, I knew two women who were older, who had gone through menopause and who didn't have any symptoms. And interestingly, they were both yoga teachers.
Hmm.
And that tipped me off just conceptually a long time ago that there's some lifestyle implications here. And I'll share that when I was cold most of my life. I was so Vata imbalanced that I was cold most of my life, and hot flashes were very weird for me. And I did the whole thing with Dr. Collins, and I found out that my progesterone was good, my testosterone was a little high, and my estrogen was low. Low estrogen is the reason for hot flashes. The estrogen progesterone relationship is really critical. And when there's not enough estrogen to balance the progesterone, that's hot flashes are the result. And I've been using a pendulum for a long time, and so I realized, oh, I need to support my estrogen. And I made a list of all of the remedies that I was aware of at the time that might impact that, including Dr. Collins herbs, which is usually one of the first that I think of. But I was also playing a little, Lori, thank you. I was playing with essential oils, and my pendulum guided me to an essential oil blend that Young Living happens to offer that I knew of years ago. And it was called Lady Sclerol. A little bit of a takeoff on Lady Clairol. And it had clary sage in it and some other things. And I remember asking the pendulum, why am I being guided to support the estrogen and not reduce the testosterone? And the answer I got was the oils are very intelligent. They'll know exactly what to do to redirect it. And I had one bottle of essential oils. It was in the springtime. It was getting warm. Like I didn't know how I'd make it through the summer. I used up that bottle. I never replaced it. I never had another hot flash. I never had another symptom. Ever. Like for many years. And when after my divorce, many years later, when I started to try to have sex again, and I realized that I was suffering from vaginal atrophy, I had to refine some of that, and I have more to say about it. But thank you for pulling this up. So the uh, so the cholesterol is actually a really important thing here as well, because cholesterol is the precursor for all of our hormones. And so all of the cholesterol reducing drugs that people are taking are very damaging. And that's why men have sexual symptoms often when they take stuff like that. So cholesterol was never the problem for health. That was a lie. And it really is quite harmful to try to reduce it. So pregnenolone can be a precursor. It can either go to down this way to make DHEA, and these precursors for testosterone and estrogen, right? Or it can go this way to make progesterone, and this is where it gets pulled down to the cortisol. Progesterone is really, really important hormone. It's the soother. It's the one that buffers the other ones. And again, when things are diverted to be making cortisol, they don't go in this direction to make the estrogen and testosterone. And beyond that, the science is a little above my head. But almost nobody I ever met has ever seen this or knew anything about it. And literally, if we kind of reduce this, the body's designed to regenerate and heal. It'll do what it needs to do. Things really do restore.
Wow. Thank you for that.
And almost no doctors know this. They've just been taught to write prescriptions, as we know. But they don't even know what menopause is. It's this ramping down that was intended. The ramping up was also intended. So we could have lots of fun with this. And Jenny, it's one of the things, in one of our modules to play with.
I need to go shortly. So what is our plan? Because obviously you guys have got a holiday on Thursday. Next week, I'm only around on Tuesday, out of our Tuesday and Thursday, because I'm going to see ABBA Voyage on Thursday evening.
Good for you.
And then I am on a narrow boat the following
Yeah, you and Laurie are both
Yeah,
a little tied up the following week.
yeah. So are we going to record next Tuesday? Is that the plan?
Ladies, honestly, I would love to have something to
knows?
work with, but I don't think we're ready with the messaging that we are refining. So what I'm gonna suggest is that we keep meeting for whoever can show up, because we always have productive conversation. We need to bring Jenny up to speed and do, some masterminding with her. Sherry's not here today. So I'm gonna suggest that we just kind of keep going, but I don't think we're ready to record because I don't think the message is there yet. As good as that
Well,
second one
and-
was in terms of the energy, all of our bios are being changed.
Right, so Thursday's off the table because it's the 4th of July. I'm gone all of next week because I'll be in Sedona.
Okay,
And then the following week, Leslie's gone. And I'm going to be tied up with some ASEA business here in Wisconsin. So I can meet on Tuesday, the 16th. But we won't have everybody back in the saddle until the 23rd.
so let's have an intention that we have all of our bios redone by then, and that we can actually do that.
My
And
diary.
And in the meantime, again, whoever can show up for, this Thursday is a holiday and we're not. But, next week, I'm available Tuesday and Thursday. There is one Thursday that I won't be. But that's not till August 1st, when there's some surgery that needs to happen, and it could only be on a Thursday. So I'm going to suggest that we just keep going around all this scheduling and be, holding the intention of moving things forward, and I'm open to anything else. And again, sending Jenny extra energy, and Sherry for whatever she's dealing with today.
So I would think, looking at this, that maybe on the 25th we could record, because the 23rd is when we'll all first be back together again
Okay,
and so And meanwhile, we need a new intention for the healing. And I only have one sentence, so I want your input. We transmute all adverse energies that might stall or stop us in any way. And clearly it's already started based on some of the circumstantial stuff. And I confess to being overly emotional that day anyway. And my lesson is, if you're overly emotional, protect yourself and don't walk into the lion's den. So we transmute all adverse energies that might stall or stop us in any way, including our own lack of self-esteem.
I like that. I think it's good. Something that was coming up for me about the transmutation process of like using that. I was reminded of something recently, just a concept I'm going to throw out here. It's Aikido is a form of martial art. I understand that is different from any other form of martial art because it involves actually deflecting your opponent's energy rather than using your own. And as a child, I mastered that in literally manipulating my parents because I was living in an intolerable world of unconsciousness. And I figured out how to use them against themselves to get what I needed to have. It's actually a very good way to work with things, is to recognize what you're up against and to figure out if there's any of it that you can turn it back on itself. I'm actually thinking about that for some things around here where I need a much better strategy. So maybe there's something about building that in. There's some Teflon, you know, possibility. Anyway, it's a principle I just thought I would mention.
So we develop self-mastery and deflect.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Any and all negativity.
In a way that serves, because, you know, it's not just being, you know, defensive. We're here to transmute.
We own our power and stand in it. We believe in ourselves.
And are ready. I think that's the thing. We're ready. Now we're ready for where this podcast takes us, for all the responses that we're going to get from this podcast, be it positive or not, basically.
But it's good not to be naive about how disruptive we're intending to be.
Yeah, I agree.
We lead with self-love. And offer love along with the wisdom we
When you
share.
just said something about we offer, I was getting this sense of like a clean field. You know, there's something pure and like not contaminated. And I know Leslie needs to wrap up and probably we all do. So how is it sounding now?
Well, this is what I've got, and tell me if we need to tweak it. We transmute all adverse energies that might stall or stop us in any way, including our own lack of self-esteem. We develop self-mastery and deflect any and all negativity in a way that serves. We own our power and stand in it. We believe in ourselves and are ready to move this podcast forward. We lead with self-love and offer love along with the wisdom we share.
That's hard to argue with. All right, universe. Think we're being pretty clear here?
Yeah, I agree.
Do we like that?
Bring it up so we can see it. Beautiful.
Yeah,
Okay. All right, I will add that to the Healy and see what we come up with.
fabulous.
Thank you. Well, in the spirit of the holiday that's here this week, it's about freedom and independence, as a
Go
kind of
Brits.
universal theme. So I always like to honor the universal themes, and it will be our theme for Davina Rising for July, about, you know, freedom from the matrix and how we exit this structure that we've been in to make other choices. So we'll be continuing that conversation. Okay.
Excellent.
think
Well, I
that-
will miss you ladies. I'm not going to see you for like 2 weeks. That's just freaking scary.
Oh,
Take a screenshot and carry it with you wherever you go, Lauren.